The drill hit something hollow at 400 meters down, which meant Sergeant First Class Dara Osa had been wrong about the depth of the Vakari subsurface tunnel network for the third time in 2 weeks. He was beginning to think the Vakari had designed their tunnels specifically to make him look incompetent. Log entry November something, he said to the recording bead clipped to his collar, his own collar, his human one, the military-issue sensor band that tracked vitals and processed audio. He always forgot the date down here. The deep rock had a way of swallowing time. Bore 6 Alpha 9 just punched through an air pocket at 412 meters. Cavity is, he shone his helmet light into the fissure and whistled low, significant. Could be a natural formation. Could be one of theirs, I'm going in. The maintenance drone hovering at his shoulder chittered twice in protest. Standard safety protocol was to wait for a second team member before entering an uncharted cavity. Standard safety protocol had been written by someone who had never been the only geotechnical specialist on a 3-person survey post. Noted, Dara told the drone. Override code Echo 7, come on. The fissure was wide enough for his shoulders if he turned sideways, the rock warm and slightly damp against his suit. He'd worked deep bore extraction on 4 worlds before this one, Callisto Station, the lava tubes of Io, the salt shelf mines of Duranthe 3, and he'd developed a nose for what was natural formation and what was made. This cavity smelled made. Too smooth. Too even, the faint smell of machine oil hanging in the recycled air. He cleared the fissure and his helmet light swept a chamber roughly 30 meters across. Artificial floor plating, corroded but intact. Support struts in the Vakari style, those distinctive triple-arch configurations that looked, to human eyes, disturbingly like rib cages. Dormant equipment stations along the walls, dark and dusty, cold circuit indicators all flatlined. Whatever this place was, it had been abandoned a long time. Not entirely abandoned. In the center of the chamber, on the floor, sat a figure. She was roughly human-shaped, bipedal, bilateral, but that was where the resemblance ended. Her skin was a deep, layered blue-gray, the texture of fine suede, with faint bioluminescent traceries running along her throat and forearms that pulsed weakly in the dark like something trying to stay alive on the last of its battery. Her hair, if you could call it that, was a mass of thin, dark filaments that moved faintly even in still air, as though each one had its own nervous system. Her eyes, when they caught his helmet light, were enormous and horizontal-pupilled, the color of old amber, and they looked at him with an expression he recognized after a moment as the same look his Labrador used to give him when it had been locked in its crate too long. Around her neck was a collar. Not like his, not a sensor band. This was a solid thing, dark metal fitted close against her throat, with a central clasp that looked like a lock. From the clasp, a chain ran to a ring bolted into the floor plating. Dara stood very still for approximately 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds he took in the chain, the collar, the bolt in the floor, the dust that had settled over everything including the alien girl's shoulders, the state of her hands, fingertips raw, nails worn down, and the dried streaks on her face that he recognized across species lines without any difficulty at all, because there was really only one thing that left marks like that. "Hey," he said. She flinched. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected alarm, threat display, flight or fight. The flinch was worse. "Hey," he said again, quieter. He raised both hands, palms out, dropped his voice to the register he used around dogs that had been hit. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to walk toward you very slowly. Okay?" She said something. Her voice was higher than he'd expected, with a harmonic quality to it, like 2 tones singing at once. He didn't understand a word. "Right," he said. "Language barrier, we'll figure that out." He crossed the chamber slowly, the maintenance drone hanging back at the fissure entrance. When he got within 3 meters, she pressed herself backward as far as the chain allowed, and the bioluminescent traceries on her neck flickered rapidly, stress response, he assumed. He stopped. She said something else. He caught the word asterisk Vicari in it, or what sounded like it, and one other word repeated twice that his translation processor pinged as possibly meaning asterisk law or custom asterisk or right of. It gave up there. Insufficient data. I don't understand you, he said slowly, tapping the bead on his collar. I have a translator, but it needs more input. Can you, he mimed, talking. Keep talking. It'll catch up. She stared at him. Then carefully, like someone testing whether a floor would hold weight, she began to speak. She spoke for about 4 minutes. Her voice shifted between registers. The harmonic quality faded when she was speaking flatly and intensified when whatever she was saying carried emotional weight. She gestured twice toward the collar, and once, with a complex motion he couldn't parse, toward the ceiling. The translator bead grew warm against his skin, the way it did when it was working hard. It processed. Then it said in its flat synthetic voice directly into his earpiece, holding station. Bond sealed by Matriarch Vakith of the 6th Deep House. Law of possession chain. Legal claim in subsurface territory. Not to be released without gap, insufficient vocabulary, formal transfer, or gap, death of the holder. Dara looked at the collar, looked at the chain, looked at the bolt in the floor. How long have you been down here? He asked. The translator worked, she answered. 43 of your surface rotation cycles, it said. I believe. I have lost count of some of them. 43 days, chained to a bolt in the floor of a derelict subsurface station. He crouched down to her level. Are you hurt? The translator worked. I am not gap, I have been maintained. Maintained, he repeated. He looked at the equipment stations on the walls, the ones that had seemed dormant. A couple of them, he realized, had soft green indicator lights he'd missed initially. Life support functions. Food and water dispensers, maybe. Whoever had left her here had set up the barest possible automated maintenance to keep her alive, like something in cold storage. Something in him went very still and very cold, and he recognized the feeling from a long time ago, from a different world, from a cramped and lightless situation he didn't think about often. Okay, he said, I'm going to get this off you. She said something sharp and quick. The translator said, you must not, you do not understand what. I understand what a chain is, he said. You do not understand the law. I understand what 43 days on a chain is. He was already examining the collar clasp. His geological survey kit wasn't optimized for lock mechanisms, but it had a multi-tool that had gotten him out of more than one unplanned situation. He found the point where the clasp mechanism was recessed and began to work. What's your name? A pause, then she told him. The translator rendered it as asterisk Seravath of the pale blue Keth lineage 3rd branching, and then added a parenthetical. Informal short form. Seer. Seer, he said. I'm Dara. Sergeant First Class, Earth Colonial Survey Corps, and none of that means anything to you, but the point is I'm not Vicari, and I'm not whoever put this thing on you, and I am going to get this off. You must stop, the translator said, catching up with whatever she was saying urgently. If you remove the collar without transfer authority by the law of the long gap, the translator struggling asterisk. The Keth subsurface compact, you will have, there is a word. Keep going, he said, not looking up from the clasp. The word is gap. It means one who has taken possession claim. The law states that the removal of a possession collar by an unregistered hand constitutes. The clasp gave. The collar fell open. He caught it before it hit the floor. The bioluminescent traceries on her throat, where the collar had sat, bloomed suddenly very bright, the brightest he'd seen them, and then settled into a steady, deep pulse. She sat very still, one hand pressed to her bare throat, staring at him. Constitutes a binding claim of, the translator said, and then fell silent in a way that felt somehow uncertain. Claim of what? He asked. She said one word. The translator thought about it for a longer moment than usual. Then it said, "Spouse." Dara sat back on his heels. He looked at the collar in his hand. He looked at her. She was looking back at him with those huge amber eyes, and the expression on her face was, he couldn't read it with confidence. He'd never seen her face before 30 minutes ago. He had no baseline, but it looked like someone watching a very slow disaster unfold with the grim knowledge that they had tried to warn someone. He said, "I'm sorry." "By the subsurface compact of the Keth lineages," the translator said, catching up with the stream of precise, careful words she was apparently reciting from memory. "The removal of a possession collar from a bonded individual by a party holding no registered claim upon that individual, when performed upon subsurface Keth territory, constitutes a public declaration of new claim. The one who removes the collar becomes, the word is Kethvar. The word means the person to whom one is bound. It means the concept does not translate cleanly. It means something close to the person who chose to set you free. The law considers such a person to be the highest possible claimant, higher than a house matriarch, higher than a bond deed. Because they chose when they had no obligation to, and choice is, the translator paused again, choice is considered sacred." There was a long silence in the derelict chamber. Something in the rock above them groaned. The deep geological voice of 400 meters of pressurized stone expressing an opinion about the structural integrity of the support struts. Dara said, "So what you're saying is that I just accidentally got married to you." She said something. "You could not have known," the translator said. "That is also part of the law. Ignorance does not dissolve the claim. The law was written to prevent people from claiming ignorance to escape the bond." "That's okay. That's actually a fairly well-designed law in other contexts. I can see what they were going for." She said something else. "I tried to warn you," the translator said. "You did," he agreed. "I wasn't listening." "You were not listening," she agreed. And though he still couldn't read her face well, he thought he detected something in her voice that was not entirely disapproving. He filed his find report that night from the Surface Post, listing the discovery of the subsurface station and one alien national found within it. Status: recovered. He did not mention the collar. He needed to understand what he'd done before he started explaining it to anyone else. He also filed a request to the Survey Corps Xenolinguistics database for everything available on Keth subsurface law, Keth lineage compact systems, and Keth social bonding structures. The response came back in 3 hours. 14 documents, 2 of them flagged as asterisk potentially relevant to personnel issues. He read them all. By the 4th document, he had stopped making coffee and was just sitting with his hands flat on the desk reading in the way you read something, that is, rearranging your understanding of your situation. The Keth were, as a species, organized around what the documents called asterisk subsurface lineage networks, extended family clan systems that had evolved in the deep rock environments of their home world, Keth Prime, which was a planet of very thin and inhospitable surface conditions, and a rich, warm, complex underground. They had lived underground for so long that their culture had developed a deep, almost theological significance around the concept of asterisk, the subsurface as sacred space. Laws made underground were considered more binding than laws made on the surface. Claims staked underground were more serious. Bonds formed underground were permanent. The collar law he found in the 7th document was an old one. It had evolved from a period when Keth lineages were in frequent conflict over resources and territory, and the collaring of a rival's member was a way of marking a territorial claim. The counter law, the one he had apparently triggered, had been written as a safeguard. Any person could free a collared individual by removing the collar, but the act of removal was not neutral. It was, by ancient legal precedent, an act of declaration. You were saying, "I saw this person in chains and I could not leave them there. and the law honored that impulse by binding you to them, because a person who could not leave someone in chains was, in the Keth view of things, exactly the kind of person who should be bound to someone. He found this both deeply logical and extremely inconvenient. He also found Document 11, which was a brief xenological note from a Keth cultural advisor attached to an earlier Survey Corps mission, which said, almost as a footnote, "It should be noted that the Keth do not consider this law to create a punitive obligation. The bond it creates is intended to be mutual and beneficial." The word Kethvar carries, in its full cultural weight, the implication of the person who is your chosen and who chose you in return, even if neither party consciously understood the choosing. The Keth believe that the act of freeing someone reveals more about your character than any formal introduction. They would argue, and have argued when pressed, that Kethvar bonds often start with better information than bonds formed through conventional courtship. Dara read that footnote twice, then he made himself coffee after all. Seer had been given the small secondary quarters at the survey post, the room they used to store geological samples when they had a full team, currently empty, and when he knocked the next morning she was awake and sitting on the floor rather than the bed. He'd noticed she preferred the floor. He didn't mention it. "Good morning," he said. She looked at him. He was still learning to read the expressiveness in the filament hair. He was beginning to understand, more like an emotional display system than hair, each filament responding to her inner state in ways that were probably perfectly legible to another Keth, and were to him currently a rich vocabulary he had no dictionary for. Right now they were still, which he thought might mean neutral, or it might mean controlled. "I have been reading your laws," he said. Something shifted in the filaments. The translator bead was on the small table between them, and she'd clearly been using it to learn because she said, in careful and slightly misaccented standard, "I also have been reading. The machine, the translator, it has files." "It has files," he agreed. He sat on the floor across from her because she was on the floor. "I owe you an apology. I should have listened to you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, still in careful standard, "You saw a person in chains." A pause. "This is what you saw, not a Keth law problem, not a diplomatic issue, a person in chains." "Yeah. In my experience," she said, and the harmonic quality was back in her voice, the double tone. "Most people see a Keth law problem." "I'm not most people." "No," she said, "you are my Kethvar. This is a different thing." He'd been avoiding that word since last night, hearing her say it was different from reading it in a document. "I don't want you to feel obligated," he said. "If there's a way to, if the law has a provision for dissolving the bond." "There is not," she said. "What about if I wasn't in Keth subsurface territory when I removed the collar? The station is at 400 meters but the territorial boundaries." "I have thought about this too," she said. She sounded, he noticed, almost gently amused. "I read 12 documents last night. The territorial classification includes any subsurface formation regardless of which civilization originally created it, if a Keth individual is present within it at the time of the bonding act. I was present. The station became Keth territory by my presence." He'd also found that precedent, and had been hoping she hadn't. "We don't have to," he started. "Dara," she said. He noticed she'd remembered his name without being told again. "I was chained to a floor for 43 days. The person who owned that chain is dead. I have verified this with the files. The matriarch Vaketh died 12 days ago, which means the automated maintenance I was receiving would have failed within days in any case." She paused. "You did not know this. You were not rescuing me because the math worked out. You removed the collar because you could not look at a person in chains and leave them there." "I couldn't," he confirmed. "The law exists for precisely that reason," she said. "I am not afraid of this bond." He looked at her. She was looking at him with those amber eyes, and the filaments in her hair were doing something he hadn't seen them do before, A slow, complex motion, not anxious, not agitated, more like, he thought, a flower turning toward light. The bioluminescent traceries at her throat were glowing steadily. "I should probably tell you," he said carefully, "that I don't actually know that much about Keth culture. I'm going to get things wrong. I'm going to say the wrong thing and eat the wrong food and probably sit in the wrong place at least a dozen times." "I will correct you," she said. "And I'm a geological survey specialist. My life is mostly tunnels and rock samples and filing reports about drill depths." "I grew up in the deep rock," she said. "I find tunnels comfortable. And I have 12 more months on this posting before I rotate out, which means we're going to be in close quarters in a very small survey post with 2 other team members who are going to have a lot of questions when they get back from the northern bore site next week." She tilted her head slightly. "What are their names?" "Breckenridge and Ewan. Breckenridge is fine, she'll adapt. Ewan is going to need about 3 days of processing time, but he always does." "I will give him 3 days," she said, with a seriousness that suggested she was filing this away as a concrete plan. The filaments shifted again, gentle and slow. He realized, been living alone in a survey post for 7 months, sending log entries into a recorder, eating packaged rations, going very deep underground every day, and coming back up to a place that was very quiet. He thought about his mother's voice saying, in the warm and slightly exasperated register she used for things she considered obvious, "Dara, you have a gift for finding things no one else was looking for." He hadn't been looking for a Kethvar. He'd been looking for an air pocket at 400 meters. "Okay," he said. "I'm going to go make breakfast. Do you eat in the morning? What can you eat?" She rattled off a list of acceptable foods. Half of them, by lucky coincidence, were things he had in stock. He stood up and she stood up, and she was slightly shorter than him, and the bioluminescence at her throat was steady and warm, and he thought that if he were writing a log entry about this moment, he would not know how to categorize it. He'd figure it out. Breckenridge came back first, 3 days before Ewan, because the northern bore had hit the water table early and they'd shut down operations. She came in from the cold and dropped her pack and found Dara making what had become, over the past 6 days, a negotiated compromise meal that worked for both human and Keth nutritional requirements, and found a blue-gray alien woman sitting at the processing table working her way through the Survey Corps Xenolinguistics manual with visible determination. Breckenridge stood in the doorway for a long moment. "Hey, Breckenridge," Dara said. "This is Seer. We found her in the subsurface on bore 6 Alpha 9. Complicated situation, I'll explain later. Are you hungry?" Breckenridge looked at Seer. Seer looked at Breckenridge. Seer said in careful standard, "Hello, I am learning. My standard is improving quickly. I am told this is unusual." "She learns fast," Dara said. Breckenridge put her pack down. "Dara," she said, in the measured voice of a person choosing their words carefully, "why is there a Keth national in our survey post, and why does she look like she's already moved in?" "Complicated situation," he said again. "Sit down." "It's a long one." He told it fully, which he'd practiced, keeping his voice neutral on the parts he'd expected judgment about. Breckenridge listened the way she listened to everything, completely still, eyes focused, processing. When he finished, she was quiet for about 30 seconds. Then she said, "The law considers your act of freeing her to be equivalent to a marriage proposal." "Functionally, yes. And she couldn't warn you in time because of the language barrier." "She tried." "And you just," Breckenridge paused, "you just couldn't leave her down there." "She'd been chained to a bolt in the floor for 43 days. Breckenridge looked at Seer. Seer was watching this exchange with those amber eyes, and the filaments in her hair were doing the gentle slow motion again that Dara had by now catalogued as meaning at ease, observing carefully. "Okay," Breckenridge said. "Okay, I have about 40 questions, but they can wait." She turned to Seer. Welcome to the post. Does he feed you enough? He forgets to eat sometimes when he's deep in a bore report. Seer looked at Dara back at Breckenridge. He has not forgotten since I arrived, she said. I remind him. Good, Breckenridge said. That's your job now. You're going to be good at it. Ewan took 4 days, not 3. On the 4th day, he came and found Dara in the equipment bay doing maintenance checks on the drill heads and said, in the manner of someone who had been rehearsing a conversation, I've been thinking about it. I figured, Dara said. The law is the law. She didn't choose to be collared and she didn't choose the bond to form with you, but he stopped, started again. She's not upset about it. She's not. I asked her, yesterday when you were down on bore 7, I asked if she felt like she had a choice and she said, Ewan looked at the wall. She said she made her choice when she kept talking. When you told her to keep talking so the translator could catch up, and you kept working on the clasp and she could have gone silent. She could have made the translator fail. She knew the law better than you did. She could have prevented it. Dara's hands were still on the drill head. She kept talking, Ewan said. She said she'd spent 43 days waiting to see what kind of person would come through that fissure. And you came through with your hands up and your voice quiet, and you asked her name before you started on the clasp. He paused. She said she'd rather take a chance on that than be careful. Dara didn't say anything. Down in the deep rock, somewhere under his feet, the planet made its slow geological conversation with itself. I just thought you should know that, Ewan said. He picked up a cleaning cloth and started on a secondary drill head. After a moment, her standard is already better than mine was after 6 months of the language module. She learns fast, Dara said. Yeah, a pause. She beat me at cards last night too. She beat me on day 2. Ewan laughed and that was that. It was month 3 when she came with him underground for the first time. He'd mentioned, carefully, that she didn't have to, that there was plenty of productive work at the surface post, that he didn't expect her to accompany him on survey dives, just because she'd said she found tunnels comfortable. She'd given him the look that he now recognized as the one she wore when she thought he was being precisely as dense as he was capable of being, and said, I'm not going to sit on the surface and wait for you to come back. I grew up in the deep rock. This is where I am myself. She was right. He saw it the moment she cleared the bore shaft at 200 meters, and her bioluminescence, which had always been visible, became in the darkness of the deep tunnel something extraordinary. Not just the traceries at her throat and forearms, but her palms, her temples, the faint glow of her filament hair. All of it responding to the rock and the dark in ways she'd explained were involuntary. A deep ancestral response. The Keth body saying, I am home. She moved in the tunnels differently than she moved on the surface. Surer, quieter. She knew without being told where to put her hands on a rock face, how to read the sound of a tunnel. She'd hear a structural stress point before his sensors flagged it. She could smell water 3 passages away. She looked at his geological survey data and began catching things his instruments had been categorizing as noise. This is not noise, she said, one afternoon in bore 6 alpha, pointing at a readout. This is a passage. There is a Keth word for this formation. It means the translator hesitated approximately, the place where the rock remembers being water. He looked at the readout, ran it through the survey processor. It came back as possible secondary cavity, verification recommended. 3 meters of careful drilling later, they were standing in a cave system that extended his survey map by 4 square kilometers. You're hired, he said. I am already your Kethvar, she said. Is that not employment enough? That's a different department. Humans, she said, in the tone she used for this, which was not the tone of someone who found humans baffling, but the tone of someone who found them endlessly, quietly delightful, have very many departments. He filed his first official report about the situation in month 4, when the Survey Corps Regional Office reached out about the unresolved status of the Keth national recovered from Bohr 6 Alpha 9. He admitted to himself, putting this off. The report took him 3 days to write. He went through 7 drafts. In the final draft he included the circumstances of discovery, the collar removal, the legal mechanism triggered, the relevant Keth statutes, Sear's own statement. She had drafted it herself, in standard, and he had not changed a word, and a note from Breckenridge and Ewan attesting to the professional and personal integration of Sear of the Pale Blue Keth lineage, third branching into the survey team's operations. The regional office sent it back with a flag requesting clarification on the specific mechanism by which the bond was formed, and whether Survey Corps Sergeant Ose was acting under orders or personal initiative at the time of the collar removal. He wrote back, "Personal initiative. I saw a person in chains. I got the chains off." The clarification note sat unanswered in his queue for 12 days. He assumed it was being escalated. He'd worked for government long enough to recognize the specific silence of a filing being kicked upward. Sear, who had learned to read his expressions over 4 months of close quarters with the focus of someone who had decided this was a subject worth mastering, looked at him across the dinner table one evening and said, "They will resolve it." "They might not." "Then we will resolve it ourselves," she said. "There are Keth legal advocates who operate in the boundary territories. I know one. She is not fond of the house matriarchs, and she is especially not fond of outdated possession laws. She has been looking for a test case for 6 years. He looked at her. "You've been planning this." "I have been reading the files," she said. "I am always reading the files. This is what you should have understood about me by now." "I'm starting to." She reached across the table and tapped the recorder bead on his collar, his human collar, his sensor band, the way she'd taken to doing, a small contact that had become, over months, easy and habitual. "Make your log entry," she said. "You always think better after." He pressed the bead. "Log entry," he said. "I've genuinely lost track again. I'll timestamp it. Month 4, survey post Keth adjacent zone 6. Situation report. I removed a collar in a derelict subsurface station and created an incident that is currently sitting in a regional legal queue and also sitting across the dinner table from me helping me draft my response, and she has already identified the best advocate for our case in 3 sectors. He looked at her. The bioluminescence was steady and warm in the dim post-lighting, and the filaments of her hair were doing the slow turning motion, that flower toward light motion, that he'd finally found a word for in the Keth glossary. It translated, approximately, as asterisk contentment, but the full weight of it, the document noted, included the concept of being in a place that is exactly right and knowing the difference. She is also, for the record, he said into the recorder, consistently right about the geological surveys and has found 3 significant formations I would have missed. And last week, she beat Ewan at cards for the 42nd time, and she prefers the floor to the bed, but has accepted a compromise arrangement that involves a floor-level sleeping platform which Breckenridge built, and which is more comfortable than the bunk anyway. And she makes the negotiated compromise dinner better than I do now because she figured out the spicing, and I. He stopped. Sear was watching him. Not like someone waiting for him to finish, like someone who was listening to each word and placing it somewhere careful. "I'm glad I couldn't leave her down there," he said. He clicked the recorder off. She said in Keth, the word the translator had never quite managed, the full version of asterisk Kethvar asterisk, the one that meant more than asterisk spouse asterisk, more than the one who freed you. The one that meant, in its deepest and oldest sense, the person who showed you what they were made of before they even knew you were watching. He didn't need the translator for that one, not anymore. The legal advocate's name was S7 Bright Iron lineage, and she was, as Sear had promised, deeply professionally invested in the test case. She was also, Dara discovered on their first video call, completely delighted by him in the way that xenolegal professionals were sometimes delighted by situations that would take years to untangle. "You just took the collar off," she said, for the third time in the call in a tone of pure appreciation. "She'd been down there 43 days, he said. "You didn't think?" "I thought she'd been down there 43 days. Seva made a sound he was coming to recognize as Keth laughter. "Sergeant Osai," she said, "I have been waiting 6 years for exactly this kind of case. The possession collar statutes have been overdue for challenge for generations, and every challenge has failed because the collaring was contested on procedural grounds. But you," she made the sound again, "you have given me a case where the bond was formed voluntarily by a free Keth national who chose, knowing the law, to allow the bond to form. You have given me a Kethvar bond formed in the deep rock, on subsurface territory, under the oldest legal precedent we have. And the Kethvar in question is a human who has never heard of our laws and acted purely on the human instinct of I could not leave someone in chains." She leaned forward on the screen. "This is not a case about the validity of your bond. Your bond is about as ironclad as Keth law produces. This is a case about whether the possession collar system that created the original captivity can be used to produce Kethvar bonds in the first place. Because if it can, then the house matriarchs have been producing Kethvar relationships through coercion for 600 years. And they know it, and they have not wanted this examined." Seer, sitting beside him on the call, said something in rapid Keth that made Seva's filament hair perform a complex display he couldn't read at all. "She says you have been thinking about this for 20 years, he told Seva. "She is not wrong," Seva said. "I am also going to win. Please send me the collar. I need it for documentation." He sent her the collar. Month 11. He was 11 months into a 12-month posting, and the Survey Corps rotation order had come in, and he'd read it twice and then filed a request for an extension. "You don't have to stay here for me," Seer said. "I know. I can accompany you when you rotate. I have read the regulations for non-human nationals accompanying Survey Corps personnel. There is a provision. It requires documentation of," she paused, "it requires documentation of a substantive personal relationship. Seva says this documentation is, in our case, extremely robust." "Seva has been saying a lot of things lately," he said. The case had generated, in Keth legal circles, what Seva described as *significant attention. He'd been described in one Keth legal journal, which Seer had translated for him with poorly concealed enjoyment, as * the human who acts first and then reads the law, which would be dangerous in anyone but who in this case appears to have accidentally done the right thing. He thought he'd framed that one. "I asked for the extension," he said, "because the survey data on Bor 6 Alpha is not complete, and there are 4 more significant formations that need full documentation, and Ewan's drill calibration technique is still not where it should be, and because..." He stopped. "Because," she said. "Because I want more time where everything is exactly like this," he said. "Before it becomes something different, even if the something different is also good." The filaments moved, that flower toward light motion. She reached over and pressed the recorder bead on his collar, the way she had dozens of times now. "Log entry," he said obediently. "Tell it," she said, "about the formation we found yesterday, the one with the crystals." He smiled. "Log entry, month 11. We found a crystal formation yesterday at 320 meters, natural cavity. Seer identified the sonic signature of it from 15 meters out and called the formation type before we'd cleared the approach tunnel. She named it in Keth. The name means, roughly, the place where the rock decided to be beautiful for no reason anyone can explain. I think it's the best geological naming convention I've encountered in 20 years of survey work, and I'm putting it in the official report, and they're going to hate it and I don't care." Sear made the keth sound he'd catalogued as approval. The posting extension request is pending, he continued. The legal case is pending. About 6 things are pending, but the survey is very good and the company is, he looked at her. She was watching him with those amber eyes in the warm light of the post, bioluminescent steady and quiet at her throat, hair tracing that slow, contented motion. The company is exactly right. He clicked the recorder off. She said, in standard that was now so fluent it had begun to develop its own accent. His accent. The cadences of his sentences worked into her speech the way water works into rock. You are going to put asterisk the place where the rock decided to be beautiful for no reason in an official Survey Corps geological document. I absolutely am. Breckenridge will support this. Breckenridge already signed off on it. Ewan will object. Ewan already objected. I filed it anyway. She shook her head. In the human gesture she'd picked up so naturally it now seemed native to her. Humans, she said, have very many departments and also very many unreasonable filing decisions, and also, she paused, also sometimes, the correct instinct at exactly the correct moment. Sometimes, he agreed. This survey post, she said, at 320 meters below the surface, in the deep rock, in the place where the rock decided to be beautiful, I want you to know that I know what this is. He waited. This is the place where the rock remembers being something it was before, she said. This is what I am also. I am remembering. The deep rock below them spoke in its slow, geological voice, something compressing or expanding or settling over centuries, patient and certain. He pressed the bead. Log entry, he said. This is the place where we remember. He left it at that. Month 8 brought the first real crisis, which in geological survey work was not so much a question of if as when. Bore 11 Delta was the deepest they'd pushed, 640 meters, which was at the limit of the drill rig's rated depth, and in rock that had given Dara an uneasy feeling for 2 weeks. Not a measurable unease, not a sensor flag. The deep professional gut read of a man who had worked in rock long enough to hear the difference between stable and almost stable, the same way you learned, eventually, to hear the difference between a building settling and a building beginning to fail. He'd said something to Breckenridge about it. She'd agreed with the assessment, and they'd agreed to run 1 more bore and then pull up. Ewan had upgraded the secondary support systems. All standard practice. What was not standard practice was Dara being the one in the bore at 620 meters, when the upper shaft section took on a fault shift. He felt it before the sensors flagged it, that specific vibration that moved through the rock differently than geological baseline, not a rumble but a tick, like a clock getting ready to strike. He had time to brace, time to clip his safety line to the bore strut, time to think here it comes asterisk with the calm of someone who had been here before on other worlds and other rocks, and had gotten out each time by being still and thinking clearly. The fault shift was not catastrophic. It was a 7-centimeter displacement in the shaft wall at roughly 400 meters, which created a partial collapse of the bore lining that reduced his exit path from a 2-person transit diameter to approximately 40 centimeters of clear space on the east side of the shaft, if the sensor data reaching him was accurate. He was not a small man. His radio was functional. He called up. Shaft wall displacement at 400, he said. I have exit clearance of approximately 40 centimeters east. Send me the full sensor map. Breckenridge sent it. He read it. Okay, he said. I'm going to need to come up slowly on the safety line, and there may need to be some modification of the displacement before I can clear it. Who's topside? Me and Ewan, Breckenridge said. And Sear. He paused for a fraction of a second. What is she doing topside? She came up to bring you lunch, Breckenridge said, in the voice of someone who was not going to elaborate on this and also was suppressing something. She has opinions about the shaft wall displacement. Put her on. There was a brief background exchange he couldn't make out. Then Sear's voice, very steady. "I am reading the sensor map." "So am I," he said, 40 centimeters east. "The displacement is a secondary result," she said. "The primary event is a stress fracture in the original bore lining at 380 meters. The 40-centimeter clearance is stable, but it may not remain stable if we introduce vibration. The winch motor of your safety line will introduce vibration." He'd reached the same conclusion and had been about to say it. "Manual line," he said. "I come up on hand over hand." "That is what I was going to say," she said. 600 meters of manual line is a long way. "Yes," she said. "I know." A pause. "I have also been reading the bore specifications for 11 Delta. There is an intermediate chamber at 200 meters natural cavity. We logged it in month 3. If you can reach that chamber, you can rest there and we can assess options for the final 200 meters separately." He pulled up the survey map in his visor. She was right. The chamber was there, roughly 8 meters across, branching left off the main bore shaft. He would need to move laterally to access it, but the lateral passage was logged as stable. "Good call," he said. "I know the formations here better than the sensor map does," she said. This was not immodesty. This was a statement of fact he had verified 40 or 50 times over 8 months. "I know," he said. "Okay, I'm starting up. Talk to me." "I will talk to you," she said. "I have also sent Ewan to reconfigure the winch for minimal vibration on standby. If the manual line is insufficient, we will try the winch at the lowest possible speed." "Good." "Also," she said, and her voice shifted very slightly. Not enough that Breckenridge or Ewan would catch it, probably, but he knew her voice now in the way that 4 months of small hours conversation and shared tunnel work produces. He knew every register of it. "I want you to come up." "I'm working on it," he said. "Good," she said, and the harmonic quality was in it, the double tone. "I will continue to talk. Tell me about the formation at 620. What does it look like from where you are?" He looked at the bore wall around him, the drill-cut face of the rock at 620 meters, and he described it to her. She asked questions. He answered them. She said things about stress fracture propagation patterns and gave him a running annotation on the sensor data as it updated. Her voice in his earpiece was very steady and very present, with the harmonic quality turned up, the way it always went when she was either worried or deeply focused, and he knew the difference now. He climbed. It took 2 hours and 20 minutes to reach the intermediate chamber. He pulled himself into it and sat on the floor of it, rock, natural, cool, ancient, and breathed for a few minutes. "I'm in the chamber," he said. "I know," Sear said. "Your heart rate just dropped 14 beats. I have been watching it." "Good monitor. You should rest for 15 minutes. "I'll rest for 10. 15, she said. "There is no practical difference for the operation, and there is a meaningful difference for your body. Rest for 15 minutes, Dara." He rested for 15 minutes. Then she talked him up the final 200, the passage so narrow in the displacement zone that he had to go through sideways with his helmet off and his arms over his head, and the rock pressing against his chest like the whole planet was leaning on him. And the only thing in his earpiece was her voice, steady and harmonic, saying, "Turn left 3 centimeters, the fracture is to your right. There is a handhold 2 centimeters above your right palm. You are almost through. You are almost through. You are through." The sunlight at the bore mouth was the most aggressively yellow thing he'd ever experienced after 8 hours of deep bore work. And Breckenridge grabbed his arm and Ewan grabbed his other arm and they hauled him the last 2 meters, and he sat on the rock shelf at the bore mouth with the sky above him, which was a large and unnecessary amount of empty space after the deep bore, and his hands were shaking slightly. Sear crouched in front of him. Her bioluminescence was running high and fast, and the filaments were doing something complex and rapid that he'd learned to read as asterisk, working very hard to appear calm. She pressed her palm flat against his sternum, the Keth gesture of verification, and he felt the warmth of her hand through the geological suit. "Your heart rate is still elevated," she said. "That tends to happen," he said. "I know." Her hand stayed where it was. "I was also elevated." "In solidarity." "Is that a Keth medical term?" "It is a personal term," she said, "invented just now." Breckenridge, he noticed, had developed a sudden deep interest in the sensor array on the far side of the shelf. Ewan was very carefully doing absolutely nothing in a different direction. "I'm fine," he said. "I know," she said. "I verified." He put his shaking hand over her hand, against his sternum. The bioluminescence at her throat bloomed warm. The filament slowed to that long, slow, turning motion. "Thank you for talking me up," he said. "You talked yourself up," she said. "I just navigated." This was, he thought, about the most honest and also the most Keth thing she had ever said. Month 9, Seva called with news. "The House matriarchs have filed a counter-challenge," she said, with the energy of someone who had been waiting for exactly this. "They are arguing that the possession collar statute creates a legal framework that supersedes the Kethvar provision in cases where the collar was affixed under House authority. They are, in short, arguing that Vakith's claim takes legal precedence over yours even though Vakith is dead, and you are alive and present, and the bond was formed by an act of free will by both parties." "Can they win that?" Dora asked. "They have won that before," Seva said, "in 6 other cases, but those cases did not have what this case has." "Which is?" "A human respondent," Seva said. "A Survey Corps sergeant from Earth who has never heard of Keth law and who, when confronted with a person in chains, removed the chains, who cannot be characterized as someone gaming the legal system because he did not know the system existed." She paused. "The matriarchs are filing on the grounds that ignorance of the law creates an invalid bond. I am going to argue that the law was specifically written to honor acts of ignorant mercy, that the Kethvar provision exists precisely because the people most likely to free someone from a collar are the people who haven't calculated the legal consequences first. The more innocent the act, the more valid the bond." Seer, listening, said something in Keth. "She says," the translator offered, "that this is correct. That this is what the law was always for." "It is what the law was always for," Seva agreed. "And it has been misused for 600 years, and I intend to make that very clear in front of the Subsurface Council." "When?" Dora asked. 3 months, Seva said. "Can you both attend via link?" "We can attend in person," Seer said, in standard directly to the screen. "I would like to attend in person." Seva's filaments performed the complex display again. "Yes," she said, "I think that would be better." The Subsurface Council chambers were on Keth Prime, which Dara had never visited, and they were underground, which he had somehow expected. The chamber itself was at 300 meters depth, cut from natural rock in the old style, lit with the same bioluminescent technology that had been Keth practice for 700 years, and the effect in a room of 40 Keth legal officials and council members was extraordinary. The room pulsed with varied light, amber and blue and pale gold, each person's bioluminescence adding to the aggregate illumination, until the effect was something between a formal chamber and a deep-sea phenomenon. Dara sat at the respondent's table in his dress uniform, because if you were going to a Keth subsurface legal proceeding you were going in your best, he had decided, with the same logic that made him say asterisk please asterisk, and thank you in whatever language the situation called for. And the room full of Keth legal officials looked at him, with expressions ranging from professional neutrality to frank curiosity, to the specific expression of someone looking at a document they have been told will change their understanding of a situation. The House matriarch representative was a tall Keth woman whose bioluminescence was controlled to perfect steadiness, the Keth equivalent of a very good poker face. and she argued with polished precision that the Kethvar bond in question was procedurally irregular, formed under non-standard conditions by a non-Keth party, and should be reviewed for legal validity. Seva argued with polished precision and barely concealed joy that the bond was procedurally exactly correct under the oldest Keth subsurface compact in existence, that the humanity of the respondent was an argument in favor of the bond's validity rather than against it, and that the House matriarchs were attempting to use procedural language to dissolve a bond they found politically inconvenient because it was drawing attention to the possession collar system. Then Seer spoke. She did not use the translator. Her standard at this point was fluent, but she spoke in Keth, the full formal register, the deep cadences that Dara had been hearing for 9 months in their small post at Keth Zone 6, and he understood maybe 40% of it, which was 40% more than he'd understood 9 months ago. He understood, I kept talking. He understood, I knew the law. He understood, I chose. He understood, the law was written for this exact choice and you have been betraying it. He understood near the end a phrase he'd learned from document 11 in the xenological database, the phrase the document had said the Keth used when they described what the Kethvar provision was designed to protect. The person who showed you what they were made of before they even knew you were watching. Seer gestured toward him when she said it. The room full of Keth legal officials looked at Dara. He looked back at them. He didn't have a speech prepared. He hadn't known she was going to do that. He was a geological survey sergeant sitting in 300 meters of Keth formal underground chamber in his dress uniform, and all he had was what he'd had at 400 meters in Bore 6 Alpha 9, the truth of the situation as he'd understood it. He said in standard clearly, I found a person in chains. I got the chains off. I'd do it again. The silence in the chamber had a quality to it that he recognized. He'd heard it before in enclosed spaces, the silence of a decision that has already made itself. Seva called 4 weeks after the hearing with the ruling. The Subsurface Council has upheld the Kethvar bond, she said. They have additionally opened a formal review of the possession collar statutes, which will take approximately 2 years and will almost certainly result in significant reform. She paused. The House matriarch representative has filed a dissent. Expected, Dara said. She has also, privately, reached out to my office to ask whether the Survey Corps has any additional postings near Keth subsurface zones, Seva said, in the precise tone of someone delivering a punchline. Apparently several of the younger House members found the case of significant interest. She wants her own human Kethvar. She wants the younger House members to have access to humans who might, in the course of their work, stumble into legally binding acts of basic decency, Seva said. This is not how she phrased it, but it is what she means. He thought about that for a moment. Tell her the Survey Corps takes applications year-round, he said. They'll have to do their own paperwork. Seva made the Keth laughing sound and closed the call. The final morning of the posting extension, month 12. He was up before the light and he sat at the processing table with coffee and his recorder bead in his hand, the way he'd done for 12 months and change, in this small post at the edge of Keth Zone 6, with 400 meters of deep rock directly below his feet, and the slow geological voice of the planet speaking in the way it always did, patient and certain, compressing and expanding and settling across millennia, without urgency, because stone had no urgency. Stone had only the fullness of time and the weight of everything it had witnessed. He heard Seer move in the other room, the specific sound of her on the floor-level platform that Breckenridge had built, the soft footstep sequence of someone who moved quietly out of habit, and she appeared in the doorway with her filaments moving in the way they moved in the first moments of the day before they'd fully calibrated to waking, which was loose and slow and unguarded, and which he'd come to think of as the truest expression of her face because it was the one she didn't manage. Coffee, he said. In a moment, she said. She sat on the floor near his chair, which was still her preference in the morning, and looked at him with those amber eyes. "You are recording." "Not yet," he said. He held the bead up. "Waiting for you." She looked at the bead, at him. "What is today's entry?" He thought about it. He thought about Bohr 6 Alpha 9, about 43 days and a broken clasp, and a word the translator hadn't had a dictionary for. He thought about document 11, and the act of freeing someone reveals more about your character than any formal introduction. He thought about 620 meters of deep rock, and her voice in his earpiece, steady and harmonic, saying you are almost through. He thought about the subsurface council chamber, and 40 council members looking at him, and all he'd had was the truth. He thought about what she had said in month 1, when he'd offered her an out that didn't exist, and she'd told him she had chosen, that she'd kept talking, that she would rather take a chance on the kind of person who came in with his hands up and his voice quiet than be careful. He pressed the bead. "Final log entry," he said. "Survey post Keth Zone 6, month 12 of 13. Tomorrow we rotate. Survey package complete, 17 significant formations documented, 4 of them located by Keth lineage geological intuition that I am formally recommending be recognized as a valid survey methodology in future core postings. The legal situation is resolved in our favor and is apparently going to reform 600 years of Keth subsurface law as a side effect, which is not something I expected from a 12-month survey rotation." He looked at Seer. "What I did not expect," he said, "in general from this posting is a matter of public record now, more or less, so I'll keep the log entry brief. I went underground, as I have done on 5 worlds. I found something in the deep rock that I was not looking for, as has happened before. The difference this time is that what I found looked at me with her hands pressed to her throat and decided I was worth taking a chance on." He paused. "She was right," he said. "That's the log entry, that's the whole thing." He clicked the recorder off. Seer was quiet for a moment. Then she reached up and pressed the bead again. He raised an eyebrow. "One more thing," she said. He pressed play. "Addendum," she said formally in the careful and slightly over-articulated standard of someone who had learned a language and now owned it entirely, "to the log entries of Sergeant First Class Dara Osai, Survey Corps, for the year of survey post Keth Zone 6. She paused. "I kept talking because I saw what he was made of before he knew I was watching. The law calls that Kethvar. I call it," she paused again, not searching for the word, the pause of someone deciding which word was most accurate. She clicked the recorder off herself. The planet spoke below them in its geological voice. The coffee got cold. Neither of them moved for a long time. He left it at that.